Okay, for this episode, I want you to think outside of the box. Here's some ideas that I want you to imagine. Think about this. When you were a kid, you're raised inside the security of your house with your parents. Sometime when you were about 18 or so, you probably moved out of your house to go to school, work, whatever. Basically, now you're independent. But let's call it you are free ranging. Now, let's take dogs for our example. For every one dog year of their lives, they're roughly 7 years old, at least in human years. So at about 2.5 years old, you say, okay, Fido, you're free to go now. You can do what you want. Cruise around during the day, hang out with your other dog buddies, whatever. And if you're hungry, feel free to come back to the house. We'll feed you. And you can even hang out if you want. Cool. Just do whatever works for you, Fido. It's your call. Another thought. You're a puppy that's always lived out in the outdoors. You've just always done what you want to do. And instead of calling these dogs strays, let's call these dogs, you guessed it, free-ranging. Giulia Cimarelli, I probably said it wrong again, of the Free Ranging Dog Project, she joins me. We explore these ideas and all the details of this really interesting project. If this episode doesn't really make you think, I don't know what will. It's definitely still got me thinking about, okay, is my dog happier outside or inside? But I know you're going to love what Julie has to say, and I can't wait to get your feedback on what you're thinking now after this episode. I know you're going to enjoy this one as much as I do, and I just can't wait to hear everything from everybody on what you're thinking now too. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at prepvet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today's a really good one. I'm excited about it. As you all know, I do a lot with animals all the time, and I'd heard about this group of dogs in Morocco that were being studied. And so I had reached out. There's a project that's been going on. I'd reach out to them, and I've been really blessed for them to participate. So today, and everybody, don't cringe how I say this thing. I'm going to introduce you to Giulia Cimarelli. I think I screwed it up again with a free ranging project, and she is in Vienna, Austria right now. Free dog ranging project. And Giulia, tell me how to pronounce the name again. Someday maybe I'll be able to speak Italian. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries, Mike. Hi, everybody. The name is Giulia Cimarelli. It sounds a bit sweeter than how you pronounced it,
Yeah,
but it was okay. No worries.
So let's talk about it, but I know we're going to talk about the free-ranging dogs, and I want to get into that, but let's talk a little bit about your background. I know you're Italian, obviously, but and you're in Austria now, but tell me how you got where you are and what brought you there, and then we'll get into what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a researcher at the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna, but I have a background in biology. I studied both in Italy and here in Austria, and I did my PhD in Austria. How did I come here? Oh, it was by chance, actually. So I was doing my master in Italy, but I was just curious that I wanted to move somewhere else and see something else. So I applied for a program that is called Erasmus, that allows students within Europe to travel between countries and spend between 6 months and 1 year abroad, doing courses at another university. And that's what I did. And it was supposed to be for 6 months to do an internship for my master thesis. And this was 11 years ago. So I wanted to work with dogs. I wanted to learn more about these very fascinating species that we live with, and they are part of our daily life in most parts of the world. And I was just fascinated by the fact that these dogs are actually carnivores. So if you think about it, dogs have been the first domesticated species by humans in a time more than 15,000 years ago, where we were just still hunters-gatherers, and we basically started to live closer and closer with a species that at that time looked way more like wolves than how dogs look like today. So already thinking how crazy it must have been at that time to live close to some animals that were kind of dangerous because they were predators, they were carnivores, just started to spark my interest. And I started, as many other researchers, started to study pet dogs, the dogs that live in our homes, that maybe sleep in our beds. And then just a few years ago, I started realizing, because a few scientific studies came out, I started realizing that actually the majority of the dogs in the world are not owned by people. They are stray dogs, village dog,
Right.
the so-called free-ranging dogs. So they make up more than 80% of the dog world population, and we know very little about them. So when I got the chance to participate in a project that really aimed at studying and understanding more these free-ranging dogs, I immediately jumped in and I started to say, yeah, that's my topic. That's what I want to work with. And I've been studying free-ranging dogs since 2019. We do so with our research group in Morocco for a variety of reasons, but let's make it simple because there are a lot of them in Morocco. So they are not, so the population of stray dogs over there is not really controlled by humans very much, meaning that they are free to roam, they are free to mate, so they're kind of still subjected to what we would call natural selection. So the human intervention in their lives is very minimal. And this is what makes them interesting, because we can study how they live and survive and communicate between each other in a way that is not too influenced by people. At the same time, of course, they live in villages, they live around humans, so we can still study how they interact with them and how people interact with dogs to understand how this living together works. Even in a culture, even in a situation where the dogs are not actually owned directly by someone. So here is how I came to study the free-ranging dogs. And that's what I'm still doing right now. Yeah.
So a couple of things just to add to what you were saying and some of the research I did, and correct me where I'm wrong, because oftentimes when you're doing the research, the information's incorrect, but they're saying there's somewhere around anywhere from 700 million to 1 billion domestic dogs in the U.S., of which 70 to 80% are free ranging, which are stray dogs. I love the name, by the way, and there's a lot of reasons. We can get into that in a minute, but I think it's it's a clever way of talking about a stray dog at some level. And then the other thing I saw too, which I found was wild, is that dogs represent 2% of the biomass of mammals on Earth. I mean, you think about that, if you compare humans and everything, 2%, that's a big number.
Yeah, it is. But sorry, I just correct you 1 second. You said a billion dog in the US. No, those numbers are for across the world. Yeah, yeah.
Right. I'm sorry. Thank you. And so one of the things I read when you use the term free ranging, basically, it's a stray dog, but they live off of basically human garbage or waste and stuff like that. Is that true, or is that it could be anywhere? I mean, basically living off domestic from the human side, getting from that, they're getting stuff from humans, but not really out hunting and gathering like you were talking about what they did millions of years ago.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's difficult to use a term. I mean, also within the scientific community, we did not really agree 100%, but basically, One can categorize dogs that are living free in different ways. Traditionally, most of the people use stray dogs, but we use the free-ranging dogs to encompass all of those that are simply not owned by people.
Okay.
In the sense in which we mean when we talk about pet dogs, where their reproduction and movements are controlled by people.
Here's a real quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but so if when you say not owned, but I know there are places where dogs are out cruising around all the time, and then they may go back to a place that leaves food out for them sometimes, but it's
Mhm.
kind of their dog, but not their dog. Is that included in free range as well, or not?
Yes, we would include them as in the free ranging category. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But it's very difficult also within the population that we study in Morocco. We have so much variability in the sense that we have some dogs that live interacting very little with people. They would not really care about the fact that there are people around. And then on the other hand, we have dogs that really like people and they have developed very specific, really individualized relationships with some. And for example, they would live just in front of one house and they will receive food only from those people. So they are kind of owned, but they are not. I mean, if they wanted to, they could just go somewhere else.
Well, it's kind of like they're their friend versus their pet.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
so to dig in a little bit to Morocco, and the town is called Agadir. Is that how you pronounce it? Agadir?
Agadir, yeah, we're working a bit north of Agadir. It's a series of villages. It's small villages, so don't need to tell you all the names, but it's in the south of Morocco, close to the city of Agadir.
Yeah, it's kind of south of Marrakesh. I actually looked on a map. I've been to Marrakesh and Casablanca. I have a real good friend in Marrakesh, actually, so I know that. But so one of the things I read and is that Moroccans in particular don't look at as, and I'm sure people have some, but they don't really consider dogs pets. They just consider them wild animals.
It's a tricky question, a tricky answer
Yeah.
to give.
Okay.
There is a lot of variability in terms of attitudes that people have towards the free-ranging dogs, or street dogs, or stray dogs, or however they would like to call them. So we have traditionally connected to the Islamic culture some, let's say, more negative attitude towards the presence of street dogs and dogs in general, because in some part of the Quran,
Oh,
the dogs have been described as unhealthy or dirty, and therefore one can see scenes, for example, before going to the mosque, of people trying to not have dogs around or shooing them away because they would not like to be touched by dogs. But this doesn't mean that the people are not friendly towards dogs. Actually, especially in the region where we are, we see very often people loving dogs and loving the street dogs in a way that they will feed them regularly, they will pet them, they will play with them. So there's so much variability, and that's what makes it so fascinating. Both from the human side and from the dog side, they can experience people that would shoo them away if they come too close, but also people that would welcome them, play with them, and be extremely friendly towards them. So there is a bit of everything, and then there are the tourists and foreigners. They also tourists and foreigners have different attitudes towards the fact that there are stray dogs. Some of them would think that, oh, poor them, they all need to be saved, and they will, during the time they are there on holiday, buy extra pets, so dog food, and start to feed all the dogs they can. And some others would have more negative attitudes in terms of, yeah, I mean, these dogs are dirty, maybe they bring diseases like rabies, so they try to keep them away, and maybe even ask, if they are at a hotel, to the managers to not have dogs around. So also within the the tourist population, you find very different attitudes there.
the same way you do around dogs. It's amazing how that works.
Yeah.
So, so I know you guys are studying some specific things, but there's a couple things that I've thought about, and I'm sure you've had people ask this all the time. So, when I look at here, and specifically in the U.S., because that's my experience with owning dogs or having dogs, and owning's actually that there's a person I'm talking to now about dogs having more or animals having more rights than what we give them. But so you domesticate this animal and you put them in your backyard, or they have a crate that they sleep in at night, and all that, and you're treating them absolutely well. But there's another theory out there that if the dogs aren't put in that in the thing and they just wanted to cruise around the way humans can do and just go do their own thing, which one's happier? Have you guys studied that part of it?
How would you define happy? It's so hard also with humans. It is so hard.
Yeah. Are they more satisfied?
But yeah, so I mean, so far there have been no consensus, no studies that would define happiness for animals. That's a very difficult concept.
Well, I do. How do you define it? Yeah, I mean,
One can look at different aspects of welfare, and if one looks at basic needs like having food, having the right temperature, being protected from dangers, it depends on the population that you study, but the free-ranging dogs might have access to really a lot of food. Where we study them in Morocco, there is human leftovers at basically every corner of the street. The temperature is mild. They have, yeah, I mean, there are diseases, of course. So from that perspective, in comparison to a pet dog that has been vaccinated, that is treated regularly, their general health and also lifespan is much shorter than a pet dog.
right,
But I can't really give an answer from the scientific perspective
right,
because there's not been enough studies to express to analyze this aspect in particular. But what I can report anecdotally is that these dogs have really the possibility to be close to humans more if they wanted to,
hmm,
but they don't necessarily do so. Even if they receive food by some specific households, people, you will often see them roaming around, interacting with other dogs, going through different areas, running on the beach, playing with other dogs. I don't know. They would decide uh, independently what
right.
to do, and this is something that yes, often is missing in pet dogs who are controlled in their movements, basically, or their lives, unless they are free to roam, which is less rare with the time going in the Western world, at least, because it's illegal in many countries
Right.
to let your dog just simply roam free. Then, I mean, those dogs on the beach in Morocco, they definitely have more freedom. But yeah, it's so hard
Yeah.
to say, okay, this is better
Yeah.
than living on the couch and being fed twice a day and being brought to the vet and not having any disease. Huh? Which one? What do you choose?
Well, and it's that question, right? It's how you look at things. It's funny because if I tell my dog to sit, it's sitting because I'm telling it to. Does it really want to sit? No. So the question is, and that's such the big question. I don't think that there's an answer to it. But one of the things is that what you'd said too is that the free ranging dogs don't live as long because of disease and that. But and my thought is if a dog lives 12 years and it's getting its shots and all that, but it's in an environment that's enclosed versus cruising around all the time and lives for 8 years. So is it 8 years of really way more freedom, or is it 12 years of having less freedom? I don't know that there's an answer for it, but I think it's an interesting question.
It's a moral question, and I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
every person will give a different answer. Maybe every dog would give a different answer, you know.
Well, I guarantee my dog would take off and run forever, but she'll eventually come back. But she's as crazy as any dog I've ever had.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your study then. So I've got let me get off of preaching about what's better. But anyways, so you guys are doing stuff to look at if they're free ranging, do they adapt to the environment, or do they adapt better by our learning? So walk me through everything so I don't totally screw this up.
Yeah, no worries. So we have different projects at the moment, all focusing on studying and understanding better the free-ranging dogs. One is more basic, is really trying to understand whether the distribution of food, for example, how much food, is it coming regularly because people put it out every single day, or is it something that just appear once in a while? The regularity of it from the time perspective, the quantity, the quality of the food, does it impact how dogs interact with one another?
Hmm.
So these dogs in Morocco live in social groups. They form groups that can be very big, up to 10, 15 animals. But there is also within the same population, in the same area, we see a lot of variability. So we have some dogs that we now have followed for many years that never really integrated in a group, but they kind of know all the other dogs, so they're very well tolerated. They might feed with one group and then another day appear with another dog, but they do not form very strong bonds or very strong association with other dogs, but they kind of know everybody, they're friendly, they're just simply not hanging out always with the same guys. While other dogs, they really form strong groups. Every day you'll find them together. Every day you go there for months and you will see more or less with some smaller changes, but like you will see the same 3, 4, 5 dogs all together. So all their daily life, their activities are together. And so this project is trying to understand why would there be this so much variability? What does it depend on? Maybe in a specific area there is a specific type of food, and this changes, of course, whether they will be together or not. Or is it dependent more on the personality of the dogs? Maybe some dogs are generally more sociable towards others and others not.
So that sounds like humans to me, personally.
I know, right?
Right.
Yeah, the fascinating aspect of these dogs is really that there is variability. Sometimes in most wild animal species, we can say, okay, this is the social organization, this is the social system. I don't know, they form groups and they are kind of stable, or this is more or less the sex ratio within a group. But with the free-ranging dogs, so far, we seem to see all possibilities. One interesting constellation that we see is often of pairs of 2 females or 2 males having a very strong bond and really doing everything together, forming a sort of little pair or a sort of alliance of 2. And then with males, for example, they will use potentially this to have more success with females. So, but not all males associate with other males, or at least not in this kind of dyadic setting.
Mhm.
So it is very, what we are trying to do is to understand what is the cause of this variability. And then we have other projects. One of is aiming at understanding how dogs learn
Right.
about their environment, specifically from other dogs, but also from humans. So, in the moment in which they are living in their environment, of course, they live in an environment that is really it's changing very often because they are humans. I mean, there are cars. It's even if they are small villages, the type of people are always different. The food might appear in always different places. So there is quite a lot to adapt to and to learn from the environment. So what we are trying to understand is if the dogs learn different type of information, like for example, where to find food or how to interact with people. This is a study that we are going to start soon. What they learn from their mothers. Do they learn what kind of food to eat from their mothers? So far, we don't know in free-ranging dogs. Do they learn how to manipulate objects from other dogs or from humans so that they can have access to food? For example, if you have a garbage bin that is, I don't know, complicated to open, would they be better in opening it if they have observed a person trying to manipulate it and opening it? So far we had one study published in which we showed that if a human is showing a preference in terms of eating from one of 2 boxes, the free-ranging dogs would go to the box where the human was seen eating from the box. So it's a very simple thing. Maybe one can say, oh, well, what we know, I mean, if we are showing such a preference in pet dogs, all pet dogs will come where you are. So they will be curious about what you're doing, what you're eating, so they will come. But this is something that with free-ranging dogs has not been shown before. And it is interesting because in an environment where there is a lot of food around, and yes, there are a lot of humans, it might not necessarily be the case. While for our pet dogs, we as humans are the most important partner because
Right.
maybe they don't have other dogs around. Maybe, yes, they meet them at the park, but it's not like their family. It's not that they live together all the time. So the human, in most cases, is the most relevant social partner. So for pet dogs, it might be kind of obvious if they need to learn something new, then they will really pay attention. They will learn from the human. But with these free-ranging dogs, it might have not been the case. It might have been that, yeah, there are just so many humans around. They're just kind of a part of the environment. They're a nuisance, maybe even sometimes they bother them while they're sleeping. So yeah, why to learn from them? But instead, at least for something simple like this, we could show that they learn. And now I was just before starting to talk with you, was starting to analyze the data from a new experiment where we tested dogs in this kind of more manipulative situation, where we wanted to see if they pay attention to a human, would they really copy exactly what the person is doing? And this is something that we know also pet dogs can do, but we don't know if the free-ranging dogs can do.
So I read some of that stuff. So let me ask a couple questions. So I know one of the deals you had two boxes and were two different colors and two different spots. And again, this is me reading not enough and probably not understanding everything. But the one where the human was getting the most food from is where the dogs were attracted to, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So did they do one where the human acted like they're eating, but it was like it tasted terrible, and they kept acting like it did? Did the dogs do that? Did they ever try that? I'm just out of curiosity because they thought, well, if he thinks it's good, I like it, but he could be totally faking it, and then they still go there. Did they do that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's already published, actually. If yes, then I can send it to you.
You can't tell the secret yet.
Yeah, no, it should be. I can say because I'm sure that it has been accepted for publication. I'm not sure if it's out there in the internet yet. But yes, they did a study in which there was a person that was eating some food and then either showing a happy face or an angry face.
Right.
And then they looked at whether the dog. This is still the free ranging dogs tested in Morocco. They measured whether the dog would then approach the food and eat it, and it seemed that they did not approach as often if the person was showing then an angry face after having eaten.
Really?
So it's not exactly the same as what you're saying. So it was more about understanding facial expressions related to a positive or a negative emotion.
Right.
It's not exactly the same as disgust. But in that situation, the dogs, even the free-ranging dogs, they could differentiate between the two facial expression and they acted accordingly. It would be very interesting to do the next step for in a study in which the human would show disgust towards the
Yeah,
food.
like this, and or if it doesn't taste good and act like it's really good and see if they eat it. I'd be curious just to me, it seems like that would be the next step. But basically what it sounds to me like, again, we're talking about me, that it shows their level of intelligence by able to do that stuff, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, these animals need to survive and live in this environment that is so complex. The one like where humans are, we do so many weird things. So for them, yeah, I mean,
Like do
we're doing
podcasts.
it is exactly. So having lived close to us for so many thousands of years help them develop with evolution and the generations passing some skills that definitely make them more adapted to understand us and to live in a world that is so fast changing and so complicated, full of weird items as well. Like imagine all the objects that we interact with. They would also have the chance to interact with them, and knowing whether it is something dangerous or something good that maybe is concealing food, it is something that is very, very relevant for a dog that is scavenging around looking for food in
Sure.
garbage bins and so on. So, yeah.
One of the things and when you do the studies, again, I don't know if it's all of them, but you use three different groups, right? You use the free ranging dogs, and then you use the pets that are based there in Vienna, I guess, or Austria. And then the other one, which I didn't really understand, is I'm going to look at my notes here real quick. They're called it's from Captive Pack Living Dogs, which is from the Wolf Science Center.
Mhm.
What do they mean by captive pack living dogs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in Austria, we have this facility called the Wolf Science Center,
Mm-hmm.
where the goal is to compare directly dogs and wolves and to understand what happened during the process of domestication. So,
Okay.
how do they differ and in what kind of behaviors or cognitive abilities? So what it is done there is to raise dogs and wolves in the same way, meaning that both dog and wolf puppies are raised by humans,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that they are fed by humans since they're very, very young and in exactly the same way. And then when they become older, so once they reach 5 to 6 months of age, they are introduced. I mean, at the very beginning, they were just puppies, and then now we have adult animals as well, but they are introduced to their conspecific groups, and they start to live in very big enclosures in the forest. We have dogs groups and wolf groups. And so dogs live with other dogs and wolves live with other wolves. Otherwise, the two of them will not be very compatible.
Right.
And basically, they are living most of their lives in this facility where they have access to indoor areas, outdoor areas, but they are mostly living, let's say, independently, but of course it's an enclosure, so they can't completely roam freely,
Sure.
and they participate to non-invasive behavioral tests. And in this way, with the fact that they are really living so both dogs and wolves are living in the same environmental condition and they have the same experience with the environment, the researchers can isolate what has changed really genetically during the process of domestication and from the evolutionary perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's why these dogs live in groups, in packs, but in a captivity setting.
Well, I did an episode with a wolf sanctuary here in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fascinating. Of all, everybody thinks, well, wolves is a wild, crazy dog. They're not dogs at all. I mean, they're in the same family, but they're completely different. The instinctual fear, the neophobia they have, and all that other stuff. It was so really interesting that the wolves should not be in a domestic environment. They're not meant to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there have been before the Wolf Science Center was established. There was another research program where they tried. They had the same goal. They wanted to compare dogs and wolves.
Right.
But what they did was to take wolf puppies and make them. So they got adopted by families, and they were living at home in Budapest. This was in Hungary, and they lived as they were pet dogs. But I know some of the people that
Right.
participated as caregivers at that time. As soon as the wolves became 5 months, 6 months, it became very difficult to deal with them.
Yeah.
So they would destroy everything in the house. They would be very scared also outside going in the city, although they were socialized to the city. But it's not the same as with
No.
pet dogs. Dogs in general are much easier to introduce to anything that is new, both that is persons or objects. So the ones they realized that it was extremely stressful for the wolves to keep living in that setting, they were then they were introduced in a captive facility as well, and they continue
Right.
living their lives in a captive facility.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing here is most of the sanctuaries they have for the wolves here are people that thought they could raise a puppy wolf and realized that they weren't supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so they end up being there. What's funny at this one here, they have a couple dogs there that are, I don't think they're wolf dogs. I think they're just dogs that think they're wolves. And the wolves actually have accepted these dogs and they hang out with them. And what most people don't realize too, a wolf's a lot bigger than a regular dog. They're big.
Oh yeah, especially North American wolves, they're huge.
Yeah, yeah.
They can go up to 70 kilos, so it's a lot. I don't know how much it is pound, but
Well, so getting back to what you guys are doing, so if you look at the three categories that you guys were looking at whenever this study was, and again, I may have misinterpreted, but one of the things I read was that the domestic animals, even the ones at that wolf place, they were more persistent when they were giving something that had food in there if they'd actually been around humans a lot, knowing that there was food in there, and then they would actually work a lot harder than the free-ranging dogs. Is that right?
the wolves would do so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the dogs seem to be lazier. Let's put it like
Well, that was
this.
going to say the free-ranging dogs. I was thinking they're just lazy because they go, I don't have to do that. I don't want to do it.
Exactly. But yeah, also the captive wolves would not need to do it really, but there seem to be a different engagement, motivation, persistence in the wolves, so much higher in the wolves than in the dogs. And it doesn't matter whether the dogs are pet dogs, free-ranging dogs, or these captive pack dogs, they seem to be generally less engaged than
Less
wolves.
persistent. Let's just say persistent.
Persistent.
But so is there a difference between when you look at domestic pets that have been raised around humans their entire life and they're being fed and or whatever, and they know, like, like an example, here in the US, if you had a dog that was getting packaged dogs out of, kibbles or whatever, or in a bag, I've seen it happen a million times, even though that food's not necessarily as good as it used to be. But if you leave that bag that's closed, those dogs will tear it open to get that food in there. I'm wondering if the free ranging dogs would do the same thing, because domestic dogs know it's in there and they're going to get it, and that's what they're going to do. Is that similar with the free ranging dogs?
It depends. It depends. We with the study that we did now, with where we tested the dogs into this manipulative task to see if they were learning from humans,
Hmm.
we saw so much variability. So some dogs really did not care. They were maybe sitting, lying around. They looked at us. They realized there was food. We were offering them boiled chicken, and they did not want to eat. They didn't want to interact with the apparatus that we were using, with the box that we were using, while others were extremely motivated and they destroyed our boxes more than once.
Right.
So my poor student needed to rebuild the boxes many times. But at the population level, I would say, so also based on the studies that we conducted, that the dogs seem to not engage unless you really, as a human, if you are present, unless you kind of push them to do so,
Hmm.
because maybe they have so much food around that they are not necessarily hungry. The area where we study them, it's really, there's no lack of food. There is really a lot of food everywhere. So for them, hunger is not an issue. If their hunger levels were higher, then most likely they would be more interested in trying to destroy something in order to get food. But that's not what we see in that
So
population.
in Morocco, what I'm guessing is when you say there's plenty of food, so basically what we would consider the human waste is easily accessible throughout the city or the area.
Yes, most of the times, yes.
Yeah. Well, and when I was looking at too, I mean, it's on the coast. So what I love is I looked at your guys' social media and I did some reading and all that. See these dogs on the beach; they're just having the best time ever. Hey, let's go to the beach today. Okay, let's go hang out. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I know, I know. I mean, if I could go back to the question that you posed before about whether these dogs are happy,
I know.
my personal, absolutely not scientific perspective would be that yes, these dogs are enjoying their lives, really. They have the freedom to go everywhere. They have social ties, they have partners, they have food, they have really a good, nice environment. And unless they get sick because of some nasty disease, they live a pretty easy going life. So yeah.
That's kind of what my thought is too. When I think of it, it's almost philosophy, right? So you kind of think about it. It's okay. Now, let's just use humans as an example, because the more I do the podcast, the more I realize how similar all beings are. We all have the same diseases and all these other crazy things too. So if we had a free life where we didn't have to worry about anything, weren't stressed about it, and we weren't using think, well, I need to do this or that. I'll go to the beach today. There's food out here. I can eat. I can hang. Doesn't sound like a bad life to me.
Yeah.
And versus being, okay, sit. No, you can't go in that room here. Here, you can have your food at specific times. This is the time you get to eat. No, you're in the backyard today because my friends are over. By the way, I have a dog that lives in my backyard too, so it's not that. But looking at it a little bit differently, it seems to me that possibly they're there. But I understand that again. It comes back to that question: is if I live 8 years and I'm free to do whatever I want to do, or live 12 years and I have to live with some restrictions, what's better? And not to say that either one's better. It's just a question, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I think I would like to add that one would need to look at the big picture in general, because of course these dogs are not living completely independently from humans, so they do interact with humans and this has advantages and disadvantages. Some people, as I was saying at the beginning, are extremely nice to them. Some others are not necessarily nice to them. So they can be victims of mistreatment. They can also, of course, be hit by cars. So it's not a completely. It's not, their lives is not completely free of pain or dangers. So it is, but I think what would be important to consider is, why do we have a different attitude towards dogs than we have towards other wild species? So if we were thinking about, I don't know, deers or foxes, even foxes that are very much closer to dogs,
Right.
it would be easier for people to say, oh yeah, but that's normal. If they get a disease or if something happens, they are a victim of predation or whatever. It is kind of normal. I mean, that's their life and their environment. But when it comes to dogs, it's very hard for us from the Western world,
Right.
to think in that way, to think that a free dog has the right to live as such. Very often, I mean, that's the most of the what we see is people coming and wanting to save them, to bring them to a shelter, to adopt them, to take them away from the beach,
Right.
because dogs do not belong to the streets, but they belong to a home. Or at least that's what many people would think. Because I think, and it has to do a lot with our familiarity with free ranging dogs,
Mhm.
with the fact that dogs can live freely. And also within the scientific community, we study a lot the pet dogs, but we tend to forget the fact the numbers that we were talking about at the beginning. The majority of the dogs in this world are actually not living as pets.
Yeah.
So I think at least that's something that is very close to my heart. I would like to give these dogs a voice, to just show them with the rigorous methods of science, but just tell their stories, tell how they live, how they survive, how they interact with each other and with humans, so that we can understand them a bit better, and also maybe with this understanding and familiarity towards their lives, we can maybe accept them a bit more.
Well, I mentioned this a little bit there. There's an organization called the Animal Rights Organization, and you should look it up. It's really interesting. And matter of fact, I've been talking to them, and they're going to be on the podcast at some point here in the future. But basically, the here in the U.S. as an example, and this is a little bit different. This is off topic, but similar to what we're talking about is, if I'm married here in the U.S. and we go through we have a separation and go through a divorce, and we have a dog, whose dog is that? And at the end of the day, the dog should be its own dog and gets to make its own decision, right? So oftentimes there's actually battles of who gets to keep the dog. And what they're trying to do now is, because here in the US, it's different maybe in other countries, but a corporation, a business, is actually considered an individual and has rights, whereas an animal doesn't have any rights. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What you're saying is these guys, I love what you're doing. You talk about the relevance of doing a study and how what you're trying to figure out how they act in regards to with humans, interaction with humans, and do they necessarily need it? Does it give them a better quality of life and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to see how that works with a free ranging versus the domesticized or domestic animals.
Yeah, it will be for now. We are focused a lot on the dogs, and I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but it's very hard to do this kind of studies. It takes a lot of time, but what would be very interesting to do in the future would be to also study other populations in other parts of the world. Because what I was saying before about Morocco is, yeah, we have the chance to study so many hundreds and hundreds of dogs, and it's relatively easy from the logistic and practical perspective for us to conduct research over there. But maybe we are just seeing one side of the story. It's like if we wanted to learn about humans, we will go only to Morocco, while we will miss a lot of other cultures and attitudes and personalities. I don't know. We would miss other aspects of what makes humans. So all that variability, all those differences across the world. So my dream for the future will actually go in different parts of the world where maybe people have also different attitudes towards the street dogs, and trying to understand what's the interplay between how the dogs behave and how humans behave towards them, and whether the interaction between the two then changes depending on culture and depending on, I don't know, the genetics of these dogs in that specific area. So, yeah.
It's interesting how they've adapted to whatever the humans are doing. So, I just did an episode it's not out yet, but with a rescue group in Nepal. Kathmandu itself has over 100,000 stray dogs just in that city alone. And culturally, and that's what we're talking a little bit about. Culturally, it's different in Morocco and anywhere you go, and culturally they're different as well. And they look at them as dogs, but they have a festival every year that's basically the Day of the Dog, and they give them respect and all this. And I love the Hindu sayings. It's a great Hindu saying. What it means is every dog has its day. So they get there one day a year, and they put flowers on them, and they put the red mark, which is called tika, on there to show the respect for them. And everybody feeds all the wild dogs, the free ranging dogs. It's pretty crazy. Pretty awesome, actually. Yeah, but it'd be interesting because I agree with you that you're looking at free ranging dogs for the most part here in Morocco, but there's so many countries where so many, I'm going to use the word stray, but but really are free ranging. They're all over the place, and with every culture there, it's just seeing how the interaction between the humans and that, and see exactly what they're learning, how if they're different. Even the feeding thing where you use the two different boxes with the reaction to the human smiling and liking it, and they're going there. It'd be interesting if they do the same thing in other cultures. It's actually kind of thought provoking. You're making me think.
Yay.
Yeah, that's cool. So for everybody else, anything else you want to talk about what you guys are doing, what you're trying to accomplish? I mean, I think we're covering all that, but is there anything else that we haven't gone over that would be interesting for everybody that's listening?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
we always have new ideas about what we can look at and study in these dogs, and also would be very welcome to listen to the ideas of our listeners, your listeners to this podcast. So
Sure.
if you have any questions related to free-ranging dogs or have made observations while traveling, when interacting with these dogs, please let Mike know and let me know. I will be very happy to hear what the people can tell about these dogs.
So for everybody that's listening out there, and you can probably do it better than I can, Julie. On the social media is a good way to get a hold of you guys. Can you give everybody? And I'll have it. By the way, everybody listening, in the description. We're recording now, so it's not live. But if you're listening, you'll hear this in the description. I'll have all this stuff if you go into the description of the podcast. But can you give everybody how they would find you, like on Facebook and Instagram and wherever else you guys are?
Yes, both on Facebook and on Instagram. The name of the page is Free Ranging Dogs Project. So
Yeah.
That's easy. While on Twitter, we have a more general account connected to our lab where we also study this wolf science center, dogs and wolves. We study the pet dogs in Vienna, but we also study wild wolves in Europe. And this is called Domestication Lab.
Say that one again.
Domestication Lab.
Domestication lab. Okay, good. So we'll do that. So now we've come to my favorite time, and we talked to Julia and I talked about this. For you guys to listen, you know, this is that time when you start cringing, you hear my joke. And so I have a joke for you, Julia, and I'm hoping, you know, because of the language thing, I hope you understand what here in the US we know what this is. And if you don't, I'll explain it to you before you have to give me the answer. So what happens when it rains cats and dogs?
Yeah, I know it. I know the term. Yeah.
Have you ever heard that term first off before we begin? Okay. Okay. So the answer is you try not to step on a poodle.
A poodle. Oh my God, that's terrible, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, you
I
know,
love
puddle
it.
poodle. It's a play on words. Anyway,
Yay. That's a great joke.
I'm glad you understand it. So,
Yeah.
anyways, everybody out there, I say it every week. I know you cringe when you hear this, but if you've got a better joke, and we all know there's better jokes out there, please send them in. And again, like I say, if you want your kids to be on the show or whatever, they can do that. And send it to my email. It's mkyle@forrealpodcast.com. And along with that, if you've got a great subject for this thing, obviously, you know, Julie it just makes this whole episode makes me think about all these different things about, you know, dogs and humans and how that works. But if you've got a great subject, please get hold of me. I get back to everybody. I really do. And I really appreciate everybody doing that. Julia, thank you so much for listening and bearing with me with my pronouncing of your last name. I know it's terrible, but I really do. I know you're busy and you're doing great things. You know, hopefully one of these times, if I'm in that part of the world, I can go to Morocco and maybe you'll be there and we can hang out. But I really appreciate you taking the time. I really do.
Yeah, thanks to you, Mark, for inviting us and having the chance to speak about these dogs. It was a pleasure. It has been so much fun. So thank you.
I always have fun with it. And for everybody out there, please, you know, pass the word out. The more followers I have, the more people find out about it, the more people reach out to me for different subjects and again, jokes too. But please keep following, keep listening. And like I always say, really from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate everybody listening, truly, for real. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.